All right, Proverbs 18. Let's call this one the sauce and call it presumption for a subtitle, understanding that part of wisdom is or seems to be avoiding the dangers of presumption, a type of folly, which reminds me of Psalm 19, a psalm that basically showed us the psalmist asking God to keep him back from presumptuous sins. And even though presumption is not a word that is literally going to come up in this chapter, it is going to seem to be a dominant, unstated theme through about the first 10 verses or so of the chapter. Also picking up again later in verses like verse 13 and verse 17. But before we get there, once again, there are at least a number of verses devoted to the concept of wisdom. I saw about 6 or 7, maybe even as many as 12, with, as we mentioned, righteousness still being a theme, but a lesser theme where it is literally going to seem to come up as an issue in about 3 verses. The whole concept of speech is still a dominant theme with roughly, as I saw, 7 verses devoted to the way in which we speak, another 2 devoted to the way in which we listen, 3 to 4 devoted to the way in which we either handle money or our work ethic, with another one with that sub-theme of either sadness or melancholy being something that it will give us counsel on. But like we said, within those first 10 or so verses, it seems that presumption is a thing. First verse seeming to talk about the ways in which the presumption of I can be a problem when it says, whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment. And when I first looked at that, I don't think I completely understood it, if I even completely understand it now. But what it reminded me of was the degree to which depending too much on I tends to give too little credit to the context in which I function. Because there's a lot of we that goes on before I can even get to work in the morning. I got some stoplights I've passed by that I don't know how to design. I've got some roads that are paved and swept that I don't know how to maintain, so on and so forth. And so if we really understand all the things that go into our individual success, then I think we can begin to have a better understanding with what the proverb writer is saying here when he talks about the way in which isolation can sometimes feed an inflated view of self or I. Verse 2, however, seems to warn about the danger of the presumption in my, when it says, a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. And so to the degree that my opinion closes my ears to listening, it goes back to warnings we've seen in previous Proverbs. It talks about the way in which a word goes more deeply into a man of understanding than 100 blows into the back of a fool. Going on to verse 5, though, where it seems the presumption of power seems to be something we need to be careful of, where it says, it is not good to be partial to the wicked or to deprive the righteous of justice. There are times when we can believe that kissing up to power, as we've mentioned in previous weeks, is enough. And so to the degree that we believe that simply being friends with the most powerful people in the room can be enough, we ignore the warnings that go back as far as Psalm 37 and 73, which reminded us that the Lord laughs at the wicked because he sees that his day is coming. Pointing all the way forward to Revelation 18, where we see God warning his people to separate themselves from the wicked, because if they share in the habits of the wicked, they will also share in the condemnation or the judgment of the wicked. And so to the degree that we begin to presume too much into our relationships with powerful people without regard to whether or not they are genuinely doing righteous things, we run the risk of sharing in the judgment of the wicked. Verse 6 quite possibly warning us about the presumption in our own power when it says, a fool's lips walk into a fight and his mouth invites a beating. There are times when my mouth can get gassed up on the presumption of what I'm able to handle on my own, especially when I'm not particularly impressed with an adversary in front of me or somebody who might have insulted me. I might make too little of their appearance and too much of what I think I might be able to do, and allow my mouth to presume that I can handle a situation in which I'm really overmatched. Likewise, verse 13 is going to warn about the presumption in words when it says, if one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. As we sometimes say, The verses at times preach themselves. Going on to verse 17, one of the last ones that I think I saw having at least something to do with this theme of presumption. It is going to say, the one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him. Verse 17, cautioning us about the way in which we, again, listen, or being presumptuous in the way that we listen. Verse 13, helping to caution us about being presumptuous in the way that we both listen and speak, reminding us that part of the sauce is being wise in the way that we hear. And God willing, make sure that we understand before we say too much. Going back to the words of my mentor who reminded me that less is often